All right, hey folks, let's see if we've got a signal here. We'll give it a shot to. Should be live. If you're familiar with the channel, are you catching this after the stream? Skip forward like a minute. Channel, are you catching this after the stream? That is loud. Okay, so there's been a shift in volume control here among my software. I'm not necessarily sure where that change came from, but yeah, so I'm just going to do some quick social media updates. Normally you'd have like a countdown timer and some cool music to listen to while this happens, but I'm not that sophisticated, so I'm just going to press a couple buttons here just to shout out that I'm active and allow me to regale you with my origin story here briefly. My name is Phil Kearney. I create role-playing games, I illustrate them, I publish them online, and I am a big D&D Eberron enthusiast. I've been a DM since 1987. I've been a freelance illustrator since 1999. I've been an Eberron enthusiast since 2004, and I've been creating content on the DMsGuild since 2018, but I have yet to publish an adventure. And since Eberron is my favorite world to stomp around in, that's where we're building it. We're creating Crystals of Mabar, which you can see here on the cover. It's about necromancers creating a manifest zone to Mabar to transform the world into something more Mabaran by nature so that they can benefit with their necromancer needs. If you find today fun, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications so when we're live in the future. Here's a whole bunch of books that I've already created on DMsGuild. They all have free previews, so you can check them out. If you think they're cool, consider making a purchase to encourage similar behavior in the future. Here's my Discord community, free access to anyone that wants to sharpen their knives and shoot the shit. Some social media stuff. You can support me on Patreon if you wanted to. And I will, let's see. Yeah, there we go. So, without further ado, we made this book cover around episode 40, so you can catch that in the Wayback Machine. But right now we are making artifacts that allow characters or whatever, anyway, spellcasters to connect to create manifest zones in the other planes of existence outside of the Eye of Mabar. Hey, Ralph, how you doing, my guy? So we're going to continue on here. We're working on the Cauldron of Kithri. Kithri is the roiling chaos, so we're making a cauldron, a roiling cauldron to match the roiling chaos of Kithri. There we go. So I'm going to settle in and get this going. And once I do, I'll probably rant about my home table. I play D&D with coworkers. We play 1 hour a week, and which isn't a lot of role playing, but it's what we can. We've got 5 players, and oh boy, that's a lot of activity for a short period of time, right? So we've built we've built an alternate game system that allows for very fast and dynamic gameplay. Which I will eventually be creating as a Kickstarter project. I've already got the trademark for Guild Delvers going, and that should end well. But the idea is built around the team controls a guild that is a source of adventure that has new tasks as the guild needs new tasks to be performed. The players select either create new characters or select existing characters to take on the task, and then they make an adventure out of it. And an adventure will typically run anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. So for a typical D&D game, it'd be like 1 or 2 sessions per adventure. And once the adventure ends, the week, the bastion or the guild turn ends, which is a week long, and then they have updates for how the guild's activities have proceeded, and new complications arise from the actions that they take as the guild, and they then have to be resolved. And so the campaign kind of flows like that. I'm going to cut across here. Because this is how the foot is shaped down here. Rel, how you doing today, man? For those that are new to the channel, I stream on Monday through Friday in the morning. We do artwork. Currently, we're doing artwork for the Eberron adventure because this is the next thing I'm going to publish. On Mondays and Thursday nights, including last night, we work on the Bastion campaign system, creating an ability check system for resolving Bastion or Guild or Dominion style of. I'm going to drop this down a smidge, and I'm going to take these and drop them down a smidge to match step here. And then let's get rid of this. And then good. Glad to hear it, man. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Yeah, I like that. Okay, cool. So let's we can call this trash. I'm gonna take all this. We're gonna bind it into the same group. Duplicate the group, and we're going to merge that group. We'll conceal this one. This is now a single layer. We're going to do some. We're just going to do some carvings along it. So I'm going to drop down the opacity here a little bit to recede it. And now we're going to. What size is our brush? A 4. Let's go here. Let's go with 3. Okay, cool. So yeah, we're going to just add some faces and stuff in here. Chaos style. So I'm just grouping and lumping some shapes together, and we'll see if I can make some cool imagery out of this. But I'm just basically blocking off some shapes here that we're going to force distorted faces into, and thus make the cauldron of Kithri basically a churning soup of souls. I think sounds suitably horrible enough. Go around like that, and then we'll be down here like this and like that. That should do for the start, and then we'll work on the lip of it. So let's drop the background down a lot. So let's take these outlines and drop them down some. And then from there we can start distorting. Before I get into this, because I can see myself diving into a rant here, so hold on real quick. I want to juice up on some hydration and chase it with some caffeine. Real quick before we really dive in, here's the Roll20 map. That we use for our table. It's an Eberron Spelljammer campaign. Each one of these squares is 10,000 miles, and this diagram is representing the orbit around Eberron. Eberron planet itself here is at center. Eberron occupies an 8,000 mile space. It's Earth-like, and then the surrounding ring is it's called in the campaign. It's called Hub. This is an artificial, basically like a Dyson sphere sort of artificial ring that has been created that is populated with asteroid miners and smelting facilities and communities, and it's basically become an artificial city that rings the world, like its own artificial continent, and it's used as a staging ground for different factions, guilds, and nations to send miners, rock miners, into the asteroid belt to harvest stone. The campaign is built around the idea that the asteroid belt that surrounds Eberron, which includes like the crystals of Sybaris, all sorts of precious metal, as well as abominations and monsters that hide in the shadows of these asteroids. There's incredible levels of wealth that can be gathered, to create gold and to extract gold, platinum, iron, copper, all sorts of precious metals, including adamantine, mithril, biesk, and of course dragon shards. And the further away from the hub you get, the more exotic the materials become, the more difficult it is to mine them, and the more difficult the monster, like the more powerful the monsters become. So the further away from the world you get, the smaller the point of light becomes, the more dangerous it becomes. So there's multiple factions. These letters are territories that the team has purchased with points that they're accumulating, they're bastion points that they're accumulating by mining the rocks. And the rocks are in a rotation around the planet, kind of like swirling in a toilet. And the threat to the campaign is that if a rock gets past all of these different factions that are mining the rocks, if a rock hits orbit, like hits critical orbit past this line inside this 3x3 square, it has enough gravity that it'll fall to the planet and potentially hit someone's home or destroy a nation, depending on the size of the rock. So these different factions and organizations are contracted to basically destroy rocks that are in orbit, so that by the time they hit the atmosphere, they burn up and don't hurt anybody. So as the team is each bastion turn, which is basically a week or so, they do prospecting in each territory that they control. And if I wanted to do it as a DM, I could do prospecting in each of these rival faction areas, but I just hand wave those because who cares? They just accumulate. They just accumulate wealth, and so depending on how well they prospect and extract ore from the rocks, determines how many points they have each turn that they then permanently spend to do something. And so they can advance the skill of their miners. They can advance their military strength. They can expand the power of their diviners to be able to use clairvoyance and divine magic to prospect and sense things that are out in the void that they need to be aware of. And there's also morale, which is keeps all their workers happy and keeps everything flowing smoothly. Anytime they fail a prospecting check, which is like a search check, like you'll do a search check in each one of these territories to determine what kind of rock is it and are there any threats. And if they succeed at the die roll, no threats at the end of the turn, at the end of the week, they can make a prospecting roll or a mining check to see if they were successful at extracting wealth from that. Each type of ore has a different value. Like gold is worth 3 bastion points per turn, while like copper is worth 1. Platinum is worth it's adamantine and crystal shards are worth 5 resources apiece. So you have a range from 1 to 5, and each rock has a percent of remaining ore or remaining rock. So when you make your ability check, if you roll like say a 16, that means that you've destroyed 16% of the rock. And you measure that percentage against the difficulty of the material that you're trying to break up. Like gold has a difficulty of, it's copper is a 4, silver is a 7, electrum is a 10, gold is a 13, platinum is a 16, biesk is 19, mithril is 22, adamantine is 25, and dragon shards, shards of Sybaris are 28. So those are the difficulties, and obviously the more exotic the material, more magical the material, the higher the difficulty is to extract it from rocks. So when you prospect, I as a DM know what's inside each rock. And when the team does a prospecting check, they do a roll against the difficulty of the material. If they fail the check, something is going wrong in that area that needs attention. That becomes a potential adventure. And then at the end of the turn, if they're after they resolve any threats there, or if it's clear for them to mine, they then make a secondary roll. And if that second roll succeeds, they extract a number of points for them to accumulate. They can purchase additional territories, and depending on how far away from hub it is the number of points they cost. The first orbit only costs 1 point. The second orbit costs 4 points. Third orbit costs 9 points. Fourth orbit costs 16 points, and then fifth and beyond is 25 points. So they're trying to afford that. Like they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 territories that they were able to mine from, but they failed some of their checks. So they were only able to accumulate 12 points this last session. One of the conflicts that they're having right now is here, Droam, which is like the monster nation of Medusa, and Aranel, which are elves. They are starting to form an alliance based around how the team has been lying to both of these factions about what they've been doing around their territories. So they're deciding to ally with each other, and they performed some espionage that discovered if they don't purchase this point here, this particular piece of property right here for 9 points. If they don't buy that, then Droam is going to purchase this territory, and the elves are going to purchase this territory, and this whole route is going to get closed off. They're going to be sealed in. And the only way for them to grow their territories at this point is here, where there's open space. Or they have to punch a hole using military power through another location. Like currently they're thinking, this was an area that they took away from Droam about 3 sessions ago through a military operation, and now Droam is pissed off at them. But there's a real risk here of Droam losing these territories here. The team is attempting to surround and take control of this peninsula so that they can open up this path to continue to grow. And if they can't, they might have to form an alliance with the Lyradar, Larander, the Mark of Passage. That's who controls this territory here. Kenneth controls this territory here. And I haven't actually decided who controls this third territory. It might be animal handlers. I'm not sure. But this is Sarlona dealing way out in orbit with all the Dragon Shard crystals to improve their psionic power. And here's the Dargoon Greenskins that are obviously at war with the elves. And so the characters are becoming a buffer between those two, which means that their territories are basically battlegrounds between these two factions, which is ugly for them. So as they fail checks in this area, the conflict, the problem is typically conflict between elves and orcs. When they fail checks over here and here, it generally has something to do with Droam messing around with them. And when it's something around like in this A, B, D, E area, A, B, C, D, this core area here, that's generally personal issues like morale issues or like technical problems. So as problems arise, they get to decide using the Bastion system that we've been developing on stream in the evenings on Mondays and Thursdays. We've been developing like consequences to failing die rolls and what kind of benefits can the team have. Well, they're utilizing those in this campaign, those ideas. And hold on, I'm going to start creating a face here. This is the idea that I was going after anyway here. I have all these faces infused. So the fun conflict that they're dealing with right now is they only had 12 points. And if they spent 9 points to purchase this property, sure, it would have created a pathway for them to be able to proceed in this area. But 9 points, they only had 1 point left over from the last turn, and then they only got 11 more points. They only had 12 points. If they spent 9 here, that would leave them with only 3 points. And every time they go on an adventure, they use those points to equip their characters with magic items and different boons and effects. Like they can purchase inspiration points with their resources. They can purchase magic items, kind of like XCOM. If you ever played the video game XCOM, or if you've ever seen it, you basically equip characters with gear to go on a mission to fight aliens. That's the theme of XCOM. So we have that same XCOM theme in this campaign. Every time they go on, like for example, they have their conflict right now. After they did all of their prospecting for the turn, The only conflict that they actually have is in Region B, and it's close to home, so it's some sort of a loyalty issue. And my job as a DM is to determine what is that conflict. And so next week, when we have our next session, I tell the characters I tell the players what the conflict is, and they decide, is that a conflict that they want to make an adventure out of for the next 4 to 8 sessions? Whatever that conflict is, do they want to make that the reason that they're on an adventure? And if they're like, no, we're not particularly interested in that, that's the only problem they have right now. It's like, well, if you don't pursue this problem, then it basically gets relegated to being resolved as a bastion check, where it's a single ability check, and if it fails, it escalates in difficulty. If it succeeds, then the complication resolves, and they can then mine that rock at the end of the week. If they make an adventure out of it, they have a full week for them to resolve the adventure, and if they do, then they can go and they can mine resources from it. If they fail, they can't gather resources from that region that week. So my DM activity this week will be to determine what's the conflict there, and be ready for... I won't have to actually start the adventure next week. They'll decide how they want to resolve the adventure. So they could choose to send in a spy team to perform an espionage mission. They could have a delving team, which are like miners or like spelunkers that go in and kill off monsters that are infesting a rock. They could have a military mission where they equip themselves with Spelljammer fighter craft, and then use the power of their siege weapons and their ships to basically have a space battle of some sort. It could be like they've fought 500-foot space squids they've fought before, and elven flitter fighter craft they've fought. There's a couple different ways you can conduct warfare or military missions, but they have basically mecha like Gundams and like Robotech Veritech ships that they pilot. If you've seen my Spelljammer book that I have linked down below, you'll have an idea of like what they can do, and then the final type of team is a diplomat team, which are people that go in and specifically try to influence another organization, like through their embassy or by visiting their clan. But it's a non-combat adventure. The espionage is a non-combat adventure. Like the espionage characters, if they fail their mission, they basically get caught. And then whoever they were trying to spy on becomes aware that the team is spying on them, and that creates additional conflicts. If their military adventure fails, that generally means that all of their fighter craft have been destroyed and they're incapable of retaining control of a region. If their delve mission fails, their spelunkers basically get killed by a grue. And if their diplomacy mission fails, they basically piss off the faction that they were attempting to negotiate with. So it becomes an adventure. So I've ran a number of sessions, prep sessions on stream. Like you can look up Diplomacy Dungeon, which is how we scaffolded a diplomacy mission that they had conducted to basically negotiate the workers' rights for a bunch of gargoyles that started working with them. And that was a fun session. It basically outlined the different conversation and logic points and points of contention during the negotiations that the team would have to resolve. And those basically became traps and search challenges to find what the problems are and discover if there was any hidden agendas that they could reveal as secret passages to be able to delve into the conversation further as over an environment. So social dungeons is a fun concept. This is going to be negotiation themed. And if the players have an appetite for that type of adventure right now, they have a diplomacy team they can send in to start conducting that conversation. If they aren't interested in that, They've been wanting to sabotage Droam. They've been wanting to research or scout around the Elven territory. They're wanting to reinforce their strength between Dargoon and the Elves so that they can basically have a position of strength there so they don't get messed with. And they're considering creating some alliances with these human guilds to help potentially expand their growth. And so they could decide to create their own adventure. And so we'll see. We'll see what they decide to do. But they had to, when they go on their mission, they'll probably spend. Well, they decided to purchase Territory K and Territory J because they couldn't really afford this territory here. Just 9 points, but this is 4 points, and this is 4 points because it's second rung. So they decided, well, we could purchase 2 territories, start digging a hole into Droam, and start securing a path out between Dargoon and the Elves. That's a better purchase for us than securing this point. We could potentially win that back through military power later. So it was a fun decision-making process. They had the opportunity to deliberate over that for a while, and it was legitimately fun. It's not everyone shows up to that session because not everyone is particularly interested in the machinations of like gaining the points and then spending the points. But you have to show up to these Bastion sessions to decide which adventure the team is going to go on next. So sometimes some of the players are like, yeah, whatever, let's just go on an adventure. Let me know what it is, and I'll show up to the next session because I'm going to go ahead and reclaim my time and do my thing, which is great because we have 5 players. So as long as at least 3 show up, but 4 of them enjoy this stuff in general, and we can typically have anywhere from 3 to 4 players at any given day. Sometimes we have all 5, so it's kind of a West March round robin where if you're here, you can play. And it takes like 2 minutes to make a character using the system that we've been using, which is the Guild Delver system that I'll eventually be publishing on Kickstarter. I want to make a more anguished face here. Like that. The Bastion system that we've been creating for 5e on my live stream, it has, when you gain Bastion points, you generally don't lose them. You either hold them in a facility, and the facility provides you with a benefit, or you spend them each turn, and then you get them back, kind of like hit points after you've rest, or like more accurately, like spell slots or a mana pool. After you finish a long rest, it becomes a renewable resource. But in this particular campaign, when you spend a point, it's gone forever. So there is no if the only points they accumulate are the points they don't spend. So they're constantly zeroing out the amount of Bastion points that they have available to them at any given time, which is a constraint that they have to deal with, knowing that if we make a big purchase here, we're dropping our resources down to 0, and every time they go on an adventure, they have to permanently spend resource points or Bastion points to equip their characters. They have a research and development component facility. Sorry, they have a research and development facility that they use to basically if they recover a magic item or some sort of like weird power, or like they find a ritual or something, they can put it into research and development, and when it comes out the other side, it becomes something that they can equip their characters with. Like they were fighting poisonous creatures, and so they extracted the poison glands from the creatures as a harvest, and then they researched it, and now they know how to make this poison that can paralyze a target if you hit them with it, and the paralysis lasts for the session. So if they shoot somebody with these poison darts and they're successful at poisoning them, that target becomes disabled and not a threat until the end of the session. They have to decide, do we need to eliminate this guy, or can we just move past them because they're paralyzed now? They have to decide if they want to spend time killing them or if they just want to keep moving. But it'll end at the end of the session, so whatever is unresolved becomes active again that they have to keep an eye out for. So like in espionage missions, they could paralyze a bunch of people, but they'll have to do something with them. Otherwise, they become freed and potentially reveal their location. So like they've got all these timers that are running, and they only have 1 hour of game time to resolve all this stuff. So there's a lot of and it's all ability checks. The whole game system is very very theater of the mind, very fast. You don't have multiple actions per round. You get one action, and what do you want it to be? Move on to the next person. What action do you want? So it's very fast paced. And the result of the ability check, like if you're in combat with somebody and you fail your ability check, they have an opportunity attack against you that damages you. So every time you roll the die, it has a set, like if the difficulty is 10 and you roll, it goes on a scale of 1 to 10, and a difficulty of 1 is a 3 or better, a difficulty of 10 is 30 or better. So on a scale of 1 to 10, you make your ability check. So like if the difficulty is a difficulty of 5, then you have to roll a 15 or better. And if you fail, like say you rolled a 12, well, you failed by 15 minus 3 equals 12. That's, you failed by 1 degree. Your character takes a point of damage or creates a complication. Yeah, like if it's combat, they would take, like, instead of damaging the target they were shooting at, they themselves get hurt, either as like as a retaliatory opportunity attack against your character, or like your weapon backfires, or or some other, whatever the conditions, like if you're fighting in a lava field, maybe you get burned by lava. It becomes narrative, but if you fail the die roll, you damage yourself. And so as the threat levels ratchet up, the difficulty increases, and you could potentially get yourself killed by making a mistake. So the team has to be careful about what conflicts they decide to open up depending on how many hit points they have at a time. And you start with 5 hit points, and then you get an extra 5 hit points for every rank that your team gains. If you start at quote unquote level 0, then you only have 5 hit points. And as the team, as the rank of the guild increases, they can hire characters that are a higher rank. So it's ranked from 1 to 5, which means you can have anywhere from, at first rank, 10 hit points, to 5th rank you can have up to 30 hit points. But like and we haven't gotten to 5th rank yet. We're only in 3rd rank right now, and we've been running the campaign for a year. So the goal is for us to run through an entire campaign where the characters get to 5th rank, and then start just to play test the system, so we can start working out the flaws so that it can become a viable role-playing game to build into a Kickstarter project. And they're all for me doing that, so that's awesome. But when we get to 5th rank, they're going to be throwing a D20 plus a D12. When they can add proficiency, they'll add a D12 to it. Otherwise, it'd be D20 plus, like generally D20 plus 5, and then whatever stats apply to whatever it is that they're trying to do. And yeah, this is looking cool. I like this. That. The Cauldron of Faces, it feels kind of like it's not an original idea, but I think it's a strong enough trope that it makes sense here, and I like it. I like it a lot. You don't always have to be original. You just have to execute what it is that you do well. And if you do, then the fact that it's not original, it isn't important. Because originality is less important than entertaining. Anyway, I haven't talked about my homebrew campaign for a while, so I wanted to do so. Oh yeah. We were talking about so like once they get to 5th rank, and they're dealing with like it's a band. At first rank, you're dealing with like challenge ratings of 4, 5, and 6, and then 5, 6, and 7, and then 6, 7, 8. Then 7, 8, 9, and then 8, 9, 10. So by the time you get to 5th rank at the top level, like level 17 to 20 in D&D terms, the difficulty of your rolls, you're basically having to hit DC 25, 28. 25, 28. 24, 27, and 30. Sorry, those are the numbers. And that's basically the range. And if you can't hit, like if the threat is 27 and you roll a 12 on your die roll, that's minus 15. That's 5 points of damage that you deal to yourself instead of to the target. If the target is an 8th tier challenge and it requires a 24, if you rolled a 28, that's 4 above the challenge number, which means you only deal 2 points of damage. And an 8th tier challenge has 8 hit points. So I have to deal 8 points over the difficulty of the challenge. So an 8th tier challenge needs 8 hits or 8 successes to resolve, whether it's a monster or picking a lock or stealthing your way across a field or deciphering a spell. It all has the same ability check, but you use different ability modifiers to see if you can succeed or not. And sometimes it's going to be impossible for you to succeed at a task, guaranteeing that you create a complication or damage yourself, etc. So it just depends on what the challenge is and how the team tries to resolve it. If it's combat and they fail the die roll, they deal damage to themselves. Like for example, if they're fighting a tier 8 dragon and the fighter tries to come in and cut it open with a sword, kill it with a sword, and so you have to roll a 24, and if you rolled a 26, then you did 1 point of damage to the dragon, and it has 7 points left before it's defeated. If you are fighting that dragon and you rolled a 6, and you needed a 24. Well, you wouldn't be able to, at 5th tier, you wouldn't be able to roll a 6. The minimum you could roll is a 7, because a D20 could roll 1, your D12 could roll 1, assuming you can roll a D12. If you can't roll a D12, then it'd be a D20 plus 5, and you literally have to get a 19 or 20 to damage the dragon. So you need to get yourself so you can use your proficiency modifier to be able to help ramp your check, but you aren't guaranteed to have a proficiency die when you make these checks. It just depends on what your character is and what you're trying to do and what your character is skilled in to be able to have those dice. So sometimes you're going to face a challenge that's literally impossible for you to succeed at the task. So you have to get clever, and that's where the improvisation comes in from the players. Like, how can you approach this problem knowing that you can't actually hit the numbers that you need, and so that becomes part of the challenge of the adventure, which is why you set a scale of difficulty within a range of 3, 4, 5, 6 at first tier. Means you only need a 12, 15, or 18, which can be really fucking difficult for characters throwing a D20 plus 4 plus 3. A D4 plus 3. So you might have at best a plus 7 to your die roll on your D20, and you need an 18. You need an 18, otherwise you're going to take damage. You're going to fuck something up. So there's a high degree of potential loss, and there's a lot of risk, and there's a lot of reward. But with that dragon, if I had rolled a 12, I was under the 24 that I needed by 12 degrees. by 12 points. Divide that by 3. That's 4 points. So like you attack the dragon, you failed the roll. Maybe there are no opportunity attacks. So instead, it's if you fail the die roll, you're retaliated against. So in that instance, I could have a number of different things that the dragon can do. So maybe you attack with your sword and you fail the die roll, so you take 4 points of damage. Or it could be it breathes fire and it does 4 points of damage to everybody. Or it could be there's 4 points of damage and it divides up the damage between the players that are there. Those are the 3 different ways that you can like deal damage to players when they fail a die roll in combat. Everyone takes the damage. The damage is broken up between the team, or you take the damage yourself. And if like at 5th rank, you only have 30 hit points, and if you just dealt your entire team 4 points of damage, that's basically a tenth of your hit points in one hit, and you literally did nothing to that dragon your turn. In fact, you almost got the rest of your team killed. So that's the challenge that goes along with it. But it only takes 2 minutes to make a character. So if your character dies, you can just swap in a new character and keep going. But every time the team loses a character, they also lose a resource point. And currently the team only has 1 resource point banked. So at the end, so if they've lost characters at the end of their Bastion turn, when they accumulate new Bastion point resources from their mining operation, they have to pay their death tax first. So if characters die, they first scrape off that many points off of how many points the team gains. So the characters are easy and recyclable and cheap, but fucking up in the adventure is going to cost your Bastion a lot of resources. You might not be able to achieve what you want to do next session or next Bastion turn. It could set you, it could set back your pace. And we've had up to 2 deaths in one session. It's never been more than that, and so far it's been pretty fun. So I could potentially be more aggressive with the system and cause more deaths, but I'm pretty happy with the tempo as it stands. So hey, Foxtrot, Indiana filling the cauldron of faces. Yeah, I know, right? It's a bit tropey, but tropes are when tropes are done well, they're iconic, right? The difference between a trope and iconic is execution and quality. But Kithri is the Roiling Chaos. It's the Limbo combined with the Elemental Storm of 4th edition. So having a bunch of faces, it's tropey. It's been done before, but I think in the context it's relatable, and it helps make sense of what this is. So again, tropes are only bad if they're poorly done. What's up? So you don't owe me anything. You don't owe me anything, man. The fact that you show up at all, I appreciate it. Thanks for helping boost the signal. Bleh. These things all have to melt together. This stuff is fun. So yeah, the campaign's coming along really nicely. Fox, I just ended a 20-minute rant about the Eberron Asteroid Belt campaign that I've been running. You can check that out if you're interested in the replay. And so I stream Monday through Friday in the morning like this. I developed the Bashing campaign source book for Dungeons and Dragons. I do that on Mondays and Thursdays, and then on Tuesdays and Fridays, including today, I do martial powers and color mana work for D&D. And today we're going to resolve the armorer artificer. And the team is now 5th level, so I'm very much looking forward to the players tackling the next sections. There's a big power bump in D&D from level 4 to 5. At level 4, a team of 4 characters, a deadly encounter is 4,000 experience points. It's 2,000 experience points. But a 5th level team, a deadly encounter is 4,000 experience points. It literally doubles. The amount of monster CR that you fight, monster experience points that you fight at 5th level is double what you did at 4th level. Your characters get extra attacks. Full casters get 3rd level spells, but you only get an extra hit die of hit points. You do gain a proficiency bump at 5th level, but 5th level really ratchets up the threat level in monsters. I'm really looking forward to seeing like how fucking difficult the challenges are going to be for our 5th level team. And they've successfully secured the first 4 zones of the temple that they've been moving through, and so they're about to move into unknown territory in the 5th zone. So I am excited about that. I've been so far I've been capable of keeping the amount of dungeon that's available for them in any direction that they want to go in. I've been able to flesh out an amount of dungeon to make sure that the content is there. If they attempt to speed run through the dungeon and try to delve to the bottom of it as fast as they can, I might not necessarily have enough content there. So we have a social agreement that they go through zones one at a time until they clear the zone. They can push past it, but like if they go too far, every 2 or 3 zones increases levels. So if they push too far into the dungeon too quickly, they're going to hit monsters of CRs that are too difficult. They'll get them killed. So you have to back out. And as you clear each zone of the dungeon, they gain enough experience to be able to gain a level, so they can pace with the level of the dungeon as they proceed. So far, it's been working out pretty well, and it would be great if we had everyone ready to go at the time that we're supposed to start, so that, because it's generally been, we have like a 3.5 hour time block, but it's been more like 2.5 hours that we actually of actual functioning game time that we've had, just because of timing on people. And so it's pacing a little bit slower than I had initially. I pace my games assuming that there's 3.5 hours worth of, or 3.5 hours worth of content. But when there's less than that, it slows down the progress. So it's taking a little bit longer than I thought it would to get from level 3 to 10. But that's not a complaint, because if it takes longer time, it just means I have more time to think about the next zone that the team is moving into. So it's all actually pacing out the way that, God would intend it to, because I can't control who shows up when they show up and who's going to be there, and so it's all part of the master plan, and the master plan is to have fun. So if a game is canceled for a week because we don't have enough people, or if it gets delayed an hour because of timing of people, then that's the way it's supposed to be. So I'm not really angry about it, but I am confessing that we're moving slower than I had anticipated. When we get through the mega dungeon is going to end at level 10, and because you can't really keep characters in a dungeon past level 10. They become too powerful. They can overwhelm the dungeon. They can visit an environment that's underground that has rooms, but you can't really contain them inside of the dungeon space. Like the dungeon itself is not a challenge. They can maneuver their way through the dungeon and delve super deep, super fast with the level of power that they have around level 9. So by the time they get to level 9, you want to kind of be at the bottom of the dungeon because they can get there super fast if they want to. But there'll be CR10 threats down there, so it'll be worth their time to delve into it. But once we finish the dungeon, we're going to switch gears and see if we can start running Strixhaven Mage Tower matches, where we're building 11th, 13th, 15th, 17th, and 20th level characters to basically play street hockey. Or like basketball, basically play basketball against each other, and use their powers and spells and magic and whatnot, and their their character abilities to score points on each other. And so we've been developing some good rules for like how to conduct a round of sports, and have like I have 3 versus 3 scrimmage teams. And if we can like actually get 6 players to show up, then we could actually have PvP matches where your primary goal is to score points to win, but you can also attack each other. And we have rules of engagement for combat and how to score points and movement and stuff like that. And it's all 5e combat mechanics. But it's fun because the Mage Tower concept from the Strixhaven setting of Magic the Gathering has this sport called Mage Tower, where you're basically taking a living ball and trying to throw it through a hoop. And it's a very vague setting concept in Strixhaven, but we're literally gamifying it. The Strixhaven adventure that Wizards published made it an ability check to resolve a match. It's basically a skill challenge. Whoever succeeds DC 15 3 times first or whatever wins the match, and that's very trite. Which is the main complaint about the Strixhaven adventure, is that it's too brief. It's too light. It's too trite. So we're adding combat mechanics, just like everything else that Wizards does that they shy away from combat mechanics. We build combat mechanics for. They were afraid to create combat mechanics for ships in Spelljammer, so we made a whole book about ship combat and fleet combat and commanding squadrons. Strixhaven was afraid to make combat mechanics for a sport, to actually run PvP matches of a game, and so we're pushing the design the design envelope of 5e and actually developing those rules to have a combat paced sport where like you can resolve a match like maybe in 6 to 8 rounds. So like maybe an hour or so of combat will finish a match. And then you could have 2 or 3 matches. If you have like a 3-hour block of time, you could finish like 2 or 3 matches. So you could run multiple games and then build your characters to try to like just to screw around and exploit the system, see how can I maneuver my character to score more points. So hey, there's text. So history question: were monster races like goblinoids, Yuan-Ti, kobolds always treated as evil in earlier editions? Like 3, yes, they were. Or is it just new age propaganda? No, they had. It was actually chaos, law, chaos, and neutral. Hold on real quick. Let me catch it with Fox. Yeah, the monsters were always monsters. Eventually, over time, the most popular became playable races. With that came a more humanizing of the races to make them more playable. Yeah, exactly. Originally there was only law, chaos, and neutrality. And if you were aligned with chaos, it's very much like Warhammer. The gods of chaos are just horrible creatures that only wanted to destroy you, cause misery, cause woe, rot, destroy the world, blah blah blah. That's what chaos is. Law is you become a point of light. You're actively trying to defend the world and preserve life. And then neutrality is it's not so much like you don't care either way. It's like a very druid stance of might makes right. This is the way of nature. And so if you have a neutral character or a neutral creature, it's their attitude is more like What are you viewing as a natural path? Like, should the army of chaos win, or should the army of law win in this battle in the swamp? Well, from the druid's perspective, a neutral stance would be whoever can survive the swamp has an advantage. So they wouldn't actually care who wins the conflict. They're more interested in how are they interacting with the world or the environment that they're in, and who's proving themselves to be acting, I guess, like most in alignment with the world. So that's one take on neutrality anyway. So these monster races like Yuan-Ti, kobolds, orcs, they were chaos creatures. They are in direct opposition to the community and societies that like humanity was trying to create to create safety. They want to tear that all down, and so they weren't quote unquote evil, though what they do could be evil. They were primarily interested in disrupting order and making the world unsafe for the soft, squishy pink races. And then, as Fox said, some of these like Dro are super fucking cool, dark elves. So people want to play Dro. So okay, well let's theorize what Dro as a race would be, and thus the dark elf subclass is created for 2nd edition and 3rd edition, and it still exists in 5th edition because they're popular. Half orcs became a thing, not full orcs, but half orcs became a thing, because full orcs were like 1 or 2 or 3 hit die monsters depending on what edition you're looking at, and were decidedly chaos-born evil creatures that were basically going to cause woe and harm to anyone that they run across. That's their bag. And so as half orcs became a thing, and I don't think half orcs weren't officially a thing until 3rd edition, though I think there were options for it in 2nd edition. And then now in 5th edition, they're just dropping away half-breed ideas because of identity and because of, philosophy. The philosophy that they hold right now, which is a trend as a corporation, they'll eventually let that philosophy go when it becomes unpopular and starts costing them money. They'll shift what they believe is important for your characters to express, depending on what the market wants to purchase. So that's the biggest problem with D&D being owned by a publicly traded company, that they don't care about the integrity of the product more so than they care about the trends of the people that are purchasing them. They will change their philosophy to align with what they think is going to give them the best market advantage this quarter, not really thinking that these books will remain in print forever, so you should have something that you can stand behind forever. Corporations don't think past the next quarterly earnings report, because that's how the stock market, that's the pace that the stock market cares about. So there's a big flaw in having a creative art like role-playing games be under the control of a corporation that has no actual stance or morality, that it doesn't quote unquote believe in anything other than we believe we can make more profit if we do it this way this quarter, not caring if they sync their product or not, which is a legitimate reason to divest yourself away from D&D. My personal problem is that I love all the IPs of D&D, and it's been my fantasy since I was 13 to create content for D&D, and I can do that on the DMsGuild. So I've been executing my bucket list of fulfilling all the things I wish I could ever do as a kid. And as I whittle down that list of things that I've achieved, I relieve that bucket list dream and open up opportunities for me to explore other ideas. So I'll eventually be done with 5e. Whether 5e is dead or not by the time I get done with it is another question. I feel like I'm racing a growing resentment. See, the problem is that the YouTube community that plays D&D, I don't think they actually care if they play D&D or not either. I think a large majority of the YouTube space only is interested in whatever their algorithms will reward them financial success with. So in that sense, unless you're showing dedication to a particular system, if you're feeling around and trying to find a way to retain monetization because D&D isn't popular anymore, that probably means you don't actually like D&D. It means that you've made a business out of talking about role-playing games, and you probably don't really care what role-playing game you talk about, as long as it's getting you likes and views. So I'm hesitant about moving away. Like, my heart so loves working in 5e. It's such a great game engine that when I see a bunch of YouTubers crapping on D&D, it's like, do you guys actually not like D&D, or is this an algorithm decision that you're playing along with? That's not very different from a corporation making decisions based on what they think their sales are going to be. And that could be viewed as a pretty hateful or call-out type of statement. I'm not talking about anyone specifically. I'm just talking about things that I see trending, and how the design space of YouTube itself talks about, this is what's trending and this is the way I can make my money. And now there's a lot of shit out there about, D&D is dead, D&D sucks, this is what's wrong with D&D. It's like, would you really think that if the algorithms encourage you to love D&D still? Because D&D used to be like, loving D&D used to net a lot of traffic. But is it the community that's causing the algorithms to change and move away from D&D being awesome? Or is it the algorithms looking for hate and changing rewards to hating on D&D, and thus attempting to wag, like, is the dog wagging the tail, or is the tail wagging the dog? That's the classic statement there. And so I really question when a bunch of people, when a huge community of content creators on YouTube that used to talk about how great 5e is, now talk about how 5e is dead. Is like, what's the motivation on that content? And so how sincere are the people that are talking about it? And so are they being sincere about the games that they're, like, Shadow Dark's getting a lot of coverage right now. Shadow Dark's a big sweetheart amongst the RPG community. But what happens if the algorithms turn against Shadow Dark? Do they just stop talking about Shadow Dark and let it die, or are they going to plant a flag on a hill? It's like, no, Shadow Dark's actually a really good system. I don't care what the community says. I'm sticking with Shadow Dark no matter what, because that's the same thing that happened with D&D, and that's what's happening with D&D right now. The algorithms are shitting on what D&D is, so YouTube content creators are encouraged to shit on D&D. You all gotta do both at one point. Players and DMs are the same. Let me catch up the conversation. Yeah, right on, Rel. I think the edition wars are dying. I think people are running systems that match the type of games they want to run. Also, the DMs are chasing systems to chase players. Yeah, that's crazy to me. We all got to do both at one point. Wasn't it Lament of the Flame Princess, then OSC, and now Shadow Dark is in the light? Yeah, that's pretty true. Dungeon Crawl Classics is starting to make a bit of a resurgence as well. So, like the role-playing game that I'm developing, Guild Delvers, it's its own game system, but it's also something that you can straddle over any other D20, like Mutants and Masterminds, Pathfinder, any D20 edition of D&D. I'm building that game to be an ability check system so that Numenera, it works with Numenera as well. It works with the Genesis system, like for Star Trek and Conan. It works with all those systems. The basic mechanics is just make an ability check. Here's your DC, and here's a bunch of ways to look at that. Like I'm trying to, like, my goal is to find ways to expand on the game system. And 5e not only has the IPs that I love, Spelljammer, Planescape, Magic the Gathering. It's just got all the things that I've loved since I was a kid. So naturally, I'm interested in being in that space because I've been a role-playing enthusiast for 40 years. So my motives as a content creator is to pay homage to the things that I've loved since I was a kid, which is D&D specifically. But the concepts of that old school, like exploration first, of having an impact on your world. And so that's why I design the things that I do, because that style of play, I think, is neglected or unknown by a large portion of the modern gamers. And it's important. I think it has a place in the community. And my personal history with D&D is what keeps me inside the 5e game engine, because I love the IPs. So I'm a very unusual circumstance where the ideas that I have are bigger than what WotC is doing with 5e, but I'm compelled to build those ideas with the 5e game engine because of my love for the narrative that is inside of D&D. Even though I readily hate how WotC has been handling the D&D IP, I also know that's just a corporate trend, and that Hasbro could throw away D&D if they decide it's worth throwing away, or they can completely change their attitude about how D&D is expressed, depending on what trends they discover are important for their next profit line. So in my instance, I'm just doing what I think is important, what I love to do, and it just happens to be the 5e game engine that I'm doing it in because of fate. And if I stay at it long enough, I'll probably find that the things that I like doing with that system become in vogue. Like for example, most of the power scaling and mechanics that I have in the Color Mana system that I published in the description down below, it actually works better with 2024 than it did with 2014 rules. Just because of the way that they utilize resources and the way that they're opening up options for characters, it makes it easier for me to design Color Mana system ideas. I've benefited, my own design work has benefited tremendously from the 5e24 system. The Bastion campaign that we're doing, it presents a very basic scaffold that I can riff off of and make really cool Dominion game systems, which I fucking love to do. So everything about 5e24 for me has been awesome personally. So that's another reason why I'm sticking with it, because the game engine that 5e is becoming leans into the kind of games I want to play. So like, why would I leave that? And that's a very, like, other people that came into the hobby like in the past 5 years, they probably don't have that. They're like, I'm looking for a fun game to play. And while 5e is a clunky combat system, if you're into highly tactical combat and you have fun battles, it's entertaining. It's worth your time. But at the same time, me personally as a DM, I prefer operating inside the exploration space where it's all about ability checks. So naturally, I'm creating a game system that's all about ability checks. So anyway, that's a rant. Don't mind me. I'm just, I guess I'm talking about business today. So cheers. Someone get me out of this. Is there, if there was a big focus on exploring like interesting natural, you know what you would make exploration adventures better is if there was a big focus on exploring like interesting natural environments. Yeah, that's, yeah, you have to create those and add enough narrative depth and risks and consequences that exploring those things presents a challenge. That's the issue, is that, like, if we're talking 5e specifically, and it sounds like you are, the problem with 5e is that there's a lack of risk and reward in the exploration mechanics in 5e, which is one of the big complaints people have about the ranger, is that the ranger's mechanics is to remove the mechanics of risk and exploration. So it's a big pickle for them to like have to add a lot of mechanical depth to make an exploration pillar dangerous and full of risk and reward. Where's the reward in exploration? Well, you get to see what's on the other side of the hill. Well, how much risk do you really need to climb a hill? That's the philosophical question that 5e is challenged with. And so in my perspective, exploration is discovering information. So like interrogating someone, that is technically, in my opinion, that's the exploration pillar, because you're attempting to make a check to see if you discover information and you might fail. And that failure, like in the case of interrogating somebody, they might be feeding you false leads and lies that lead your character into danger. Like in the instance of, like, say, a volcano, if your character paths wrong, maybe your team starts dehydrating. So now you need dehydration rules because the heat from the lava, you get yourself trapped in like you're now on a peninsula of lava and you're going to have to backtrack. You've lost time. That time causes dehydration. That's kind of what, that's one of the real risks that was in Dark Sun. The environment was so hostile that just the act of exploration of trying to find your way through a gorge, for instance, could get you killed. Not only are there horrible nightmare monsters hiding in the dirt, but you could run out of food or hydration before your character dies. And that was an ongoing threat throughout the game. They also nerfed you down, like they got rid of like create water spells. So like if you didn't have water, you were fucked. So they really leaned into the challenge narrative of exploration by taking away a lot of the magic that makes D&D so easy to survive exploration with. Take those tools away and it becomes, and then add severe consequences for failing checks, and now exploration becomes really dangerous. And Dark Sun really leaned into those mechanics more than anything. But it's also just an incredibly hostile setting with a very specific flavor to it. So it's hard to export those ideas just into the world in general. So yeah, there has to be risks. There has to be risks and rewards for making for having the checks be there in the first place. Like, why are we wasting our time with the checks to just not die? That's fun. That's what a survival challenge is. Don't die, you know. But there's no specific rewards to it. A good role-playing game has a mix of meaningful rewards that improve your character, along with risks that they have to take to achieve them. You have high hopes that 5e surviving long-term between the successes and Odyssey from Mike Merle coming out. There's still meat on those bones. Yeah, I think 5e is a great game engine. It's just who's stewarding it, where's the design work going to, what ideas and themes are being created from it, and oh my god, it's only 7:30. You know what? The benefit of getting on stream earlier is that I have more time. I'm having a great day. I'm having a really great day. Kind of channeling a little bit of my inner Ditter Lizzie to try to make these faces. I'm thinking about Planescape while I'm doing this. I used to just stare at all the Planescape art that Tony Ditter Lizzie made in the Planescape box sets back in 2nd edition in the 90s. That art was amazing. It really his anatomy was such crap, but his style was so good that you didn't care the anatomy was bad because it was part of a whole. And the whole idea of planar magic and living on alternate planes, like physically altering your form, allowed for like a wide diversity of almost comic-like character proportions and a wide disparate between how different types of people were expressed or depicted mechanically. Copy, paste, free transform, flip, horizontal. Merge down. Honestly, I want a new edition that leans a bit more on the side of non-combat challenges like tracking people, solving mysteries, yet survival challenges and negotiations. I mean, that's you can do that already, but yeah, the five, like if you want to stay inside the 5e game engine, you kind of have to build those tools or find supplements that lean into those mechanics to give you more of that grit. And there's a lot of supplements that have been published on through Kickstarters, third party, as well as on the DMsGuild that lean into different styles of play. It's just you have to find them, and Wizards as a rule doesn't promote anything that's on the DMsGuild unless it's something they produced themselves, and even then they may or may not actually promote it. There's a real issue about them picking someone to win, because I don't know so much now, but in like 5 years ago, if Wizards said, hey, here's a book that's on the DMsGuild, Phil's color mana system for D&D is perfect for you to use with Ravnica and Strixhaven, you should check it out, I'd get 10,000 sales immediately, and they would just basically press a win button for me, and I would win. And that is an incredible, that would be at the whim of somebody in their office. Somebody in the gaming community is just now going to get promoted to elevated status because Wizards pointed them out. Like that's a problem. So they have to maintain silent neutrality as people create a diversity of good and shit. And so there could be multiple products out there that hit that scratch the itch that you're looking for, that already exist using the 5e game mechanics that we already know, that solves those problems. Like for example, the One Ring 5e leans into exploration and a lower magic setting where travel is more consequential, and the characters aren't don't throw around a lot of magic. They have very limited magical capabilities. They are far more mundane and at risk of normal type challenges. Like that style of 5e, the One Ring 5e, might be a better game mode for the type of aesthetics that you like. But it's still 5e, and it's still sold on D&D Beyond, so it's still inside of the WotC game space. But it has a much different emphasis than high fantasy. High magic fantasy that D&D actively promotes. Copy paste, free transform, flip horizontal. There we go. Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Let's see. What's the next thing we need to do? Need to peel off the lid. there. Drop the opacity there, and let's create a new layer. What's up? And I don't see a D&D main with those. I just don't know if you can have a good skill and social-based game that can feel mechanically grounded with a single D. Fuck yeah, you can. Do not see, and you don't see a D&D game made that goes away from the D20. So these need something more like than a dice. The math and the resolution of a D20 is insane. It's a single rolled value, so it's a flat output compared to say 3d6, which provides a bell curve, which shows a more stable version of outcomes. Yeah, my personal opinion is the way that failure is processed with a D20. Like I was talking about earlier with the way. Hold on, real quick. There, and this is supposed to be here, and this is supposed to be here. Like the D20, if you hit it, the degrees of success, if your target number is 15, regardless of how you have modifiers, if you succeed the die roll, you have a number of degrees of success to whittle down a problem. And if you fail the die roll, it's a degree of failures below the target number creates the narrative of what's the story like. Like I was talking earlier today about the system that we've been developing, where if the difficulty is 15 and it's on a scale of 1 to 10, DC 1 requiring a 3, a difficulty of 10 requiring a roll of 30, which is a very Numenera sort of initial dynamic. But then the difference is when you roll, if the difficulty is 15 and you get a 30, then you have 5 degrees of success. If the difficulty is 15 and you roll a 2, you have 5 degrees of failure. And so that those degrees of failure can either convert into hit points, or it could create like additional challenges. Like if you're fighting a DC a difficulty like a tier 10 challenge boss fight, and you fail by like say a degree of 6, you could take 6 points of damage as a result of you fumbling your attack against them, or the big bad guy could summon a mob of minions that creates a secondary threat that's a difficulty of 6. So now you're fighting a tier 10 boss with a tier 6 mob of minions that only require an 18 to hit and only 6 successes to remove them. But if you don't spend action economy attacking them, they're going to damage you every round. So now you have to split up your attacks between 2 different targets. The boss at tier 10 and his minion horde that came in at 6. And you could have like a thing like you can't have more than 2 hordes support the main the villain at a time. So if the team kills off the mob 6 and then fails by a degree of 5, maybe a new mob of difficulty 5 comes in that the team now has to deal with. Or he could just be dealing 5 points of damage to the characters at a time, and they die after 30 hit points. They're dead, so they can only take 6 hits like that. It's just the way that you determine success, the way that 5e is currently constructed, where it's a static bonus with static yes/no results. That is too mechanically thin to be able to sustain a wide degree of narratives. Like even in the 5e game engine, like the Spelljammer system that I created, I still have the proficiency die, which is rampant in Essence 20 games. Essence 20, Renegade Games licenses IPs from Wizards of the Coast and then makes role-playing games out of them. G.I. Joe, Transformers, Power Rangers, My Little Pony. It all uses the Essence 20 game system, which is a D20 plus variable dice as proficiency dice. And depending on how proficient you are in a task, will determine what die you can roll. And then there's a bunch of other, like mechanical caveats that go along with it. But that's the core of the Essence 20 engine. And that's all just riffing off of a variant rule that was in the 2014 DMG, saying instead of having a static proficiency bonus, you can roll a proficiency die to create a variable on how successful your skill at something is by rolling high or low on your skill die, adding to the overall result of the D20. And I think that's incredibly, I use that in almost all my shit now because I love that proficiency die system. And so I'm not a huge fan of the Essence 20 game engine because I think it's too complicated I think it has too much complication for not enough actual mechanical innovation. Like the only thing innovating is how far into proficiency dice can we lean. Like you can roll like multiple dice. Like if you have, I think it's like if you crit or something like that, you would roll like you're maxing your skills at D12. You could roll a D12 and a D10 and a D8 and a D6 and a D4 and a D2 with your D20. And you decide of all those dice, which one do you want to keep? And if you ever roll the maximum number on a die, that's a crit. So if I'm rolling a D4, D6, and D8, and I roll a 3 on my D8, a 5 on my D6, and a 4 on my D4, I might decide to keep the D4 because even though it's a lower number, if it's still successful, it's a crit. So can I crit with that +4 bonus, or do I need the +5 from the D6 just to hit? So there's a deep mechanical that's deep mechanics, but they don't have enough risk and reward consequences in the game to really make that amount of that decision making worth it round to round. It's everything that you're doing works that way, and I think it's too much mechanical crunch for too little value. So that's my main complaint with the Essence 20 system. And what I don't like about the Cypher system, it works on a scale of 1 to 10, where a tier 10 threat requires a roll of 30. But the way that the Cypher system works is that your character's abilities reduce the difficulty, and the goal of Cypher system is to not roll dice at all. That if you can drive the difficulty of a challenge down to 0 because of circumstances, skill, and boons that your character have, if I can drive that result down to 0, I no longer have to roll my die and I automatically succeed. And your goal in the game, the meta goal, is to not roll dice at all. And we played Cypher System at my home table for over a year, and ultimately we stopped playing it because we like rolling dice. Big number, good. Hitting big number, feel good. So I love as a DM, I love the narrative mechanics that go into what the Cypher system is, but my players hated playing it. It's like, we want roll big number good, and this whole game is all about reducing the result, like reducing the numbers instead of increasing them. So like there was a real game feel mismatch. Some people love that. And it's a very viable system if you love that. But the DM is playing a very different game than the players, because in Numenera, the DM doesn't roll any dice at all. All the DM needs to know is what's the tier of the challenge that they're facing. It's up to the players to resolve it. And it has almost a 5e. It's more like a 4e level of mechanical complexity in combat. And I think that's too complicated. That's antithetical to I think that's contradictory to the goals of the Numenera game. So I think at its very core, it has an identity crisis about what is it actually trying to achieve, and how is it, and what's it telling your players want to do, but what tools is it providing for your characters to do that? Like D&D not having any real deep exploration mechanics isn't a flaw of D&D 5e. It's a feature. Like, they're specifically leaning away from mechanical complexity and exploration challenges, and basically minimizing the game to be social engagement of like narrative and storytelling. Excuse me. They're leaning away from that exploration challenge into combat simulation with bouts of social interaction. Like, that's where 5e is currently going, but obviously they're encouraging other styles of play by picking up the One Ring 5e. Like, they acknowledge, hey, we don't do a lot of mechanical depth with core 5e. Here's another thing that we're selling on D&D Beyond that's a lot more about low power fantasy and exploration survival. If you're into that stuff, consider playing the One Ring. And they created a marketing partnership with that organization to be able to present those things. So I mean, cheers to that, I guess, right? So there are other ways to run the game. It's just a matter of what is your game engine, what are the mechanics that you're introducing into your D20 game? What is the mechanics encouraging to do? And does the game system that you've developed, does it encourage that the style that's implied by the mechanics? Anyway, that's a rant. Meanwhile, Star Wars rolls 17d6 plus 1, please. And, you know, it's still there for you, Rel. You can check in the replay. Let me catch up. I want to see something new from D&D. Yeah, fair enough. Like a non-D20 D&D system. Huh. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people that used to play D&D 5e that are attempting to make a non-D20 D&D game. Draw Steel from MCDM. Dungeon Coach is DC 20. Rollmaster is a percentile system. Warhammer Fantasy, I think, is also percentiles. But it's all the same. It's all the same fantasy trope type of content. It's just a matter of what game systems you like. World of Darkness can technically be ran as a D&D game if you structure it that way. It's just got a lot of it's not really framed that way, but like I think Werewolf the Apocalypse makes mixing Werewolf the Apocalypse with Mage the Ascension, I think is decent for a fantasy role-playing game sort of motif. It'd be highly supernatural in nature, but I mean that's heroic fantasy in a nutshell, right? So you can pull that off pretty easily. Where are we at? It's 7:49, so I've got a little less than 10 minutes. But yeah, I think if the proficiency dice weren't in place, I think I may have honestly gotten bored with 5e game design. Using proficiency, finding ways that proficiency dice can increase the risk reward paradigm and type and ways of measuring success in the 5e game engine. I think that's really preserved my interest in it. I would love personally to see them lean a little bit more into that as the default game mechanic. But that's just me being me, you know. Like that's the way that I like to do it. So I'd like to see things done that way. Big surprise. You want to see things done the way that you like to do them? Yeah, makes sense. That tracks. All right, I think we can call this cauldron done. Oh, there's a big gap here. There, this is going to be a lot of fun to color. I can have like more heat at the bottom, and then have it cool as I go up, and that can change the color that we use, and having it all be a material instead of like various colors like the skin and stuff like that. Having it be a metallic structure. I think this is going to be a lot of fun to colorize. Probably more so than almost anything else here. Multi-dice sounds interesting if they are clear for when they are using each type. And each type being used, yeah. Sure. Go for it, man. All right. Hey, we completed that item. So let's drop all the stuff away. Let's take this and all of that. Let's drop it in. There we go. So the only things left is the Lantern of Duluth, and I need to figure out what I want to do with this kiln. I haven't figured out the ice kiln. It isn't jiving with me, but I don't know what I'm supposed to replace. I don't know what I need to replace. Frisia, the Frozen Plain. We'll figure something out. We'll find something. It'll come to us. It's in queue right now for me to have a solution. So we can close up the cauldron for now. When we come back, we'll probably work on the Lantern of Duluth. So this will be next session tomorrow, and then that'll leave us with the kiln. The replace the kiln. I really don't know what I want to do with that. The kiln of Rizia, the plane of ice. Maybe a windmill. It's a plane, winds, maybe frozen, maybe like a frozen windmill. That doesn't feel good. I like the idea of a kiln because it's supposed to be heat, but it's producing ice. That's oh, maybe like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's an anvil. Maybe the anvil of Furnia. It makes you can forge frozen objects from it. That might be a cool idea. Maybe we should do that. Oh, we can make it out of ice. Oh, the frozen anvil. Neat. I think we just found it. Yeah, we can make an ice anvil. Holy shit. And so for you to be able to create the manifest zone, you have to be forging, you basically have to be creating things of ice. Like you're forging ice to freeze the region. That's a fun idea. Yep, we'll go with that. Anvil of Rizia. That's fun. Excellent. Yeah, it's weird contradictory stuff. I mean, sometimes it's on the nose, like the seed. What is it? The seed of Lamania, the Twilight Forest. Like a seed makes sense, but it's not buried. It's just growing out of it's anyway. There you go. Some of these things are obvious. Some of them, like the banner of Shavareth, the battleground. That makes sense. Like some of these things are intuitive. Some of them are contradictory on purpose. It's just interesting things, like taking ideas of interest. So, I'm excited. Yes, Frozen Anvil. That's fucking cool. So there we go. I'm gonna make a trash layer here. Trash. And then go down here into text. Anvil. There. Save. And it's 7:56. it's time for me to bounce. I'm going to be back. I'll probably be here like around 12:30, maybe 1 o'clock Seattle time. That'll be like in 5 hours. And then we'll work on the Armor Artificer. And that'll be our game design lunch today. I'll have another game design lunch on Friday, which will be the Artificer Alchemist. This is revising them with the new playtest mechanics for 5e24, which I'm loving 5e24. I love it because of all the things that we get to do with it. If I was just playing raw 5e24, I would probably be bored with it. It doesn't 5e doesn't move as far out and do as much as I want it to, which is why I build all these books and actually use them in my games. So yeah, we'll be doing that stuff. We're gonna build that. I'll be back tomorrow morning to work on Duluth, the Lantern of Duluth. And then Thursday we'll be back. We'll resolve the Anvil of Rizia. And then Thursday night, we'll continue with the Bastion campaign, developing the orders and facilities. And then Friday, we'll be back in the morning to begin coloring this stuff. And then at lunchtime, we'll work on the Alchemist. And then Saturday, we'll do playtesting for Martial Powers at 5th level. Got a lot going on, guys. All right, I will see you guys on the other side. Thanks a lot for being here. Fox, Rel, you guys are great. And anyone else that's new to the channel, like and subscribe. It's kind of a study hall. Hang out. See you guys when we get to. Cheers.